It's the first time I've done this in the daylight in a while. My name is Dashin Grizzly. I am in Ellsworth, Iowa. It's been a while since I've been here. Last time I was here was on the snow day, when I didn't do shit for about a day and a half, maybe even two. But, whatever the case, today we're talking about openness to experience. This is the trait that is predictive of whether or not somebody will be liberal. Just like conscientiousness is the trait that predicts whether or not somebody will be conservative. It is not a good idea to look at openness to experience as the same as IQ, even though its substrata is intellect and openness, otherwise known as creativity. You really just could call it creativity. IQ measures things that are different than openness to experience. Things like problem-solving skills, working memory, fluid intelligence, verbal IQ, your ability to articulate things. Openness to experience is a little bit different. It focuses on the urge to go about certain things. For example, somebody who's creative is open. That's somebody who's high in openness. And it is one of those things where there's that quote that gets passed around a lot, and I kind of agree with it to a certain extent. It's, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will always think itself stupid, or something to that effect. And off of that same line of thinking, which, it has its own little versions of truth in it, but people come to the conclusion that everybody is creative in their own way, and that is a lie. This openness to experience is the trait in which we see the most variance and the least amount of distribution to the farthest end of it, because people in general don't have the actual capacity to be creative. It is rare for somebody to be creative. And when we pass around something like that saying that everybody is creative, it's like, it undermines the personality theory itself, the metrics by which we measure it, even though most of the time this is just self-report. But when we think about somebody's ability to self-report often, you have to consider something like, I know there's an internet meme with people overusing it, but the Dunning-Kruger effect. I almost forgot. That's not good. Working memory. I should work on that. I didn't even mean to do that. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the delusion that when you are entering a field, you know more than you do. And the curve is somewhat like, it's based off the pattern of time you've experienced something and the confidence level. And it tends to peak as soon as you're moderately good at something. And then you have the disillusion of yourself, and you're not aware. And eventually, you get put in your place by either other people or the task in which you think you are better than you actually are. And you slowly build back up your confidence. And when people who think themselves creative enter a creative field only to either be deluded enough to not realize they're not creative, or have people telling them they are when they aren't, you get the kind of thing we see with everybody being a rapper now. Now, I am all for it. If you are interested in doing music, if you are interested in being an artist, if you are interested in writing, but you are no good at it, you deserve to give yourself a fair shot. People who are great at things aren't automatically good at them, but giving yourself time to develop the skill to lend your creativity the tools in which to manifest itself is important. I know people who are extremely creative that don't exactly have the toolkit that they should in order to articulate their vision properly. So when we think about openness to experience, it's important to notice the difference in between somebody who has a high IQ and somebody who has a high percentile rate in openness to experience, because they do have some fundamental differences. Something to note about IQ, though, is that it's not fair. So I mentioned that conscientiousness is the second most powerful predictor of long-term life success. Now, that is something you don't really choose either, but you really don't choose IQ. It is not a fair distribution at all. And IQ is the only thing that trumps conscientiousness. Now, we can measure IQ. We have no idea how somebody can be industrious, or we have a better idea for orderly because of the disgust sensitivity factor. But IQ is the most powerful predictor for long-term success. It is unequivocally certain. So when we think about the distribution of IQ, it's not nice. It doesn't feel good to us, because you can think of somebody who has above average levels of IQ, let's say in the 120 plus range, and people who have an IQ of about 120 plus are in the same position as people who have an IQ of less than 85. And a real good metric of determining this is people with an IQ of less than 85 are basically illiterate. And they are the kind of people who, and I don't mean illiterate like they can't read, but functionally illiterate. They can't follow written instructions. And the same amount of people are in a first-tier college. So people in higher education are in the population at the same rate as people who are functionally illiterate. For every person you know that's in college, you could know somebody who's functionally illiterate, but depending on your social circles, that could be changed. But the overall numbers are there. Now, what's really interesting is when we think about IQ in terms of the individual, you have to look at individuals as who they are. But if we think about it vaguely and across a range, men and women differ quite a bit. Now, I mentioned this earlier with Calpie. Hi, Calpie, he's watching. Men tend to be at the end of the distributions more so than women. And women tend to focus, or rather, they don't choose to, but women tend to fall more so along the averages. So you have less moronic, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Women are less moronic than men, and women are also, there are fewer women geniuses than there are genius men. That just seems to be how it plays out. We don't exactly know why, and I don't have any pontifications to share with you that could shed light on it. All I know is the data is there for it. So you see more men in academia. You see more men at the higher levels of academia doing the most difficult kind of research work there is. But you also see men who fall at the very, very lowest end of the IQ distribution. And people who fall below 85%, there are more men than women. And people who are above 120, there are more women than men. But women in general tend to hover around the average. Therefore, the average woman is smarter than the average man. But there are more men geniuses. Don't shoot the messenger. Well, that being said about openness, about intellect, about IQ, and what exactly differentiates them, where do I fall? Let me know. What do you think? Am I low this time? Well, I finally didn't score low. It's not bad, not bad. I like these scores. I think they make sense. I'm not hyper on either of those levels. Not at the far end of the distribution. So, intellect, not the same as IQ. People who are high in intellect are problem solvers, are interested in ideas and abstract thinking. You find there are some instances where other traits can affect where somebody would fall on this. Somebody who is, for example, unconscientious, who is high in intellect, won't engage in very, very long-term sessions where they have to focus. They're not going to sit there and master chess or something. Somebody who is high in extraversion will be working on teams with people, whether, somebody who is low in extraversion will be a singular scientist focusing on a singular thing with no team. Somebody who is low in agreeableness, who's high in intellect, will focus on something like mathematics, focus on something like engineering, things, because agreeable people are interested in people, disagreeable people are interested in things and ideas. So an agreeable person with high intellect will do something like psychology, will do something that involves people, will probably more likely be a medical professional of some sort. So people can widely differentiate themselves based off their other traits, and you can look at your traits and kind of, if you're high in intellect, have an idea about which kind of career would be most suited to you. Now, people with a high intellect score probably will be entering professional fields, that area, 120 IQ plus. People low in intellect don't necessarily have to enter professional fields, but if you're low in intellect, it doesn't necessarily bother you to be in the lower end of social and dominance hierarchies. Whereas if you're high in intellect, you will not function well. You probably will have a very bad time about going through life at the bottom of a hierarchy. It will make you resentful, most likely. It will make people who are high in intellect bothered that the world doesn't see in themselves what they see in themselves. So it's a double-edged sword that if you're unconscientious, low in industrious, low in... you get it, low in conscientiousness, then you're not going to do so well if you're high in intellect. Especially if that low conscientiousness really takes a toll and manifests itself in your life through laziness or not being goal-oriented. It's not a good place to fall. Openness, where my people at? Score pretty well in this too. I enjoy that it's right at that 75 percentile mark, because people who are high in openness, really high in openness, will probably annoy me. They'll do things like think in metaphor instead of, having some kind of literal underbelly for which their statements will have some kind of factual, merit to them. Some texture by which they grip onto the fabric of reality. Somebody who's really, really high in openness will be a musician, an artist, a writer. They'll be driven to write. They'll be driven to create. Creation will be more important than monetary gain, but often somebody who is so high in actual openness itself can find a way to monetize their art, even if it's not their main source of income. We don't give people enough credit who do find a way to monetize their creative endeavors, because it's not easy. And the world, for some reason, doesn't value art. That's not true. The world values art a lot. But there are too many artists for the world to value every single artist's work. And especially somebody who's really, really high up there on the openness scale and has the skills, the tools to back it up. The beautification that goes into certain cities is the number one reason they get visited. Paris, for example, gorgeous, and there's a reason, because it's beautiful. Time went into the architecture. Time went into everything about that city's beautification. And the amount of dollars that get brought into countries that are beautiful, whether it's, their natural landscape, which has its own value, but the people of the country that bring beauty to their country, untold hundreds of millions of dollars through tourism alone. So we can't underestimate the value of people extremely high in openness, but they are a vast minority. Like I said in the beginning, not everybody is creative. Bold-faced lie to assert otherwise. And it's not really a harmful lie, because I'm all about encouraging people to try everything. Like I said, you must develop the skills before your creativity can manifest itself in a way that's reflective of how you see something in your head. You can be a great songwriter in your head, but if you don't have the ability to replicate the melody going on in your head, you're kind of screwed. You're functionally incapacitated in the creative realm which you have chosen. So, creative people, open people, really ought to get these subcategories down, because I'm fumbling today. But I'm also tired, and it's morning, even though it's, 9 p.m. on East Coast time. I'm in a night driving schema again, so yay for that. So I have to readjust my schedules. I am not exactly articulating everything that I want to exactly as I wish, but that's the basics of it. That's where the openness to experience realm falls. Intellect and openness. And let me know where you are on that, where you feel like you are. Take a test. Talk about it. Shoot the shit with me. My name is Dashan Grizzly. I'm in Ellsworth, Iowa. Understand yourself. Yeah.